Yeah. Okay, next one. This is also stunning, shocking, completely unexpected. More land for nature. Who would have possibly guessed that? I read something the other day too, and we could comment on this. The Sahara Desert has shrunk by 8% since the turn of the millennium. We've greened an additional 10% of the Earth's surface as a consequence. That's part of the same development, and that's only over the last 20 years. And it looks like it's a consequence of increased carbon dioxide. Perversely enough, the Sahara has actually shrunk. So I don't want to get into the carbon dioxide argument, but this is a whole different issue here. Tree cover loss gain from 1982 to 2016. So comment on that.
Yes, I mean, one of the things is that one of the benefits of getting a little bit older, perhaps the only benefit of getting a little bit older, is that one gets wiser and one remembers all the stuff that we used to believe and take for granted, which have never happened and which were false. One of them was the expansion of Sahara. In the 1980s, I remember being absolutely terrified that Sahara was going to expand and swallow the globe. We, as kids, we were taught that as gospel, but Sahara is shrinking. It is also true that there is more foliage, which is more greenery. Plants are producing more foliage because of the CO2 in the atmosphere. CO2 is for another discussion, but the fact is that it's the basic fact of living on Earth that plants like more CO2 in the atmosphere. It's their food, which is why Norway grows tomatoes in hothouses that are filled with CO2, precisely because they want them to grow. And so plants like CO2, and foliage is increasing, but also the tree coverage of the world is increasing. I wrote this statistic down thinking that we might talk about it. Between 1982 and 2016, we have added trees, tree area the size of Alaska and Montana combined to the world. Now, that's a pretty big chunk of the world. The United States has 35% more trees than when Ronald Reagan became president of the United States. China, 35%. No, China is 15%, yeah.
Okay, so now I've read critiques of this too. When I've tweeted this, for example, people say, yes, but we've lost a tremendous amount of biodiversity, that much of the new growth is monoculture in contrast to the previous growth. And I suspect that's not true in some situations and is true in others. I don't think that's true of the reforestation of the United States, but I don't know. Do you know?
Well, first of all, compared to what? At the time when Industrial Revolution started in Great Britain, which was responsible for many of the great things that happened since then, at that time, one of the reasons why they had to switch to coal is because there was no tree left in Britain. I'm exaggerating, but I am not far off. The tree coverage in Britain was just completely diluted of forests over millennia of forest destruction. Remember, trees were not only needed to keep you warm, but to cook your food, to make your furniture, to make your carriages, to make your weaponry. Everything prior to the modern era was based on trees. I'm exaggerating, but not too much. Trees. Now, so compared to what? We have destroyed a lot of the natural forest with its original biomass long time before the Industrial Revolution, which, by the way, used up coal, not trees. But today, most of our tree usage comes from the new forests, the forests that are planted for the specific purpose of being cut down for lumber, which then builds American and Canadian houses. It is very rare that the sort of wood that you see in the shops or that goes into productive activity actually has originated in the Brazilian rainforest.
Right. So I guess the objection would be those aren't forests, they're crops. They just happen to be crops of trees. And I suppose, and biodiversity loss is obviously problematic. And even potentially catastrophic. But I don't think that means that you can't take heart about the fact that much more of the planet is green and there's a certain amount of reversion to a more natural habitat. Certainly an indicator that we're much more efficient users of resources. We don't have to take up so much space. And the agricultural revolution also contributed to that to a great degree. That's human ingenuity again, because we can grow more on less land. And I don't see that stopping. I think we're going to get more and more and more efficient at food production. Why would that stop? The market certainly drives us in that direction. And there's no indication of that slowing as far as I can tell.
So 3 points, I hope I can remember them. One is, yes, because of increased agricultural productivity, we are already returning land to nature, and we can do so in the future at an increased pace, which means that we are returning land not just to the animals, but we are returning it to nature, where the biomass can grow again and where it can reconstitute itself. The second point is that we are also living in a world that has record acreage and mileage and square mileage of globe's territory, which is protected from any kind of interference from humankind. So we have record square mileage of oceans, which are now protected and which cannot be fished in. And we have record square mileage of land, which is protected in national parks or is otherwise excluded from economic activity. The third point that I want, and that comes with wealth. The wealthy countries they are.
And stability and political stability, because you don't need much catastrophe and social breakdown before those national parks and all their animals are going to have everything eaten out of them.
Typical example would be Zimbabwe, yes. And the last point I want to make is that we have a problem in Brazil. Brazil has obviously vast rainforests and very ancient forests, which are filled with all sorts of things that we may discover are helpful to us in the future. As well as dangerous, but nonetheless, very few people would say that it's a good thing to get rid of the Brazilian rainforest. My understanding is, and I'm willing to be proven wrong on this, is that most of it has to do with farming, especially of poor people in Brazil, who burn forests in order to clear the land for agricultural activity. Now, I realize that this point may not necessarily be appreciated by wealthy people in the West, but poverty in developing countries can be very, very bad. In Brazil, there are some pockets of real wealth, but there are also pockets of tremendous poverty. And the more inland you get and the more into the Amazon you get, the poorer the people become. These people, from their perspective and the perspective of their government, should be allowed to earn a living. The way you protect Amazon is to have higher rates of economic growth in Brazil, so that those people start moving away from the Amazon. They start moving to cities like Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro and others, and they start working there in the factories, in the service industry, and they no longer have to burn forests in order to plant food so they don't starve.